Boa tarde a todos. Infelizmente vou falar em inglês porque meu português é um pouco enferrujado depois de 3 anos aqui no Reino Unido. Mas se tiver perguntas depois eu posso responder em português se necessário. So, sorry, it's in English. But perhaps it helps to show that I'm giving a view from outside Brazil, from here in the UK, because that's what it will be. I'm sure my colleagues here will give you a much more professional view, much more rooted in the reality of Brazil. So I hope to give you something a bit different as it seems from outside, and I hope it's not too far from the truth. 7 things I want to say. Number 1, congratulations. This is a great idea, a great initiative. I read the initiative that you have taken. It is a very important time, I think, for Brazilians to try to think and discuss the way forward in this difficult situation where views are so polarized in Brazil. I also have some experience in organising conferences, and I know how difficult it is. So well done to all of you for managing to achieve it. That's the first thing. Point 2. For what it's worth, I hope it is worth something. There's a lot of goodwill towards Brazilians and Brazil here in the United Kingdom. And I think reaching out to people in British government, British commerce, British organisations, British society is important. There are some very old links between our two countries, some newer links as well, but people want to cooperate with Brazil, people like Brazil, and you should always remember that, regard it as an asset. And I hope it remains that way. I hope the British links with Brazil remain strong and get even stronger. And when we're talking about business, certainly UK Trade and Investment, which is the British arm, British government's commercial arm, has always been hugely interested in Brazil, has a large presence in Brazil to help British companies trade with Brazil and also to help Brazilian companies invest in the UK. So that's the second point. The third point, this is about competitiveness. What is it? Well, competitiveness is one of these enormous terms. It can cover a vast range of things. But it's important to have in your mind it's not just about a narrow range of things. It's not just about how a business organises itself and so on. It's about a lot of things. It's about the big picture as well that we've been hearing about so far. It's about infrastructure. It's about the economic framework. It's about institutions. It's about economic management by government. It's about health. It's about education. It's about security. All these things impact on the competitiveness of companies in any country. And if you look at the international indices for competitiveness, there are measures. These are the sort of things which are taken into account in measuring competitiveness. Now, why does all this matter? We have to say this first. It matters because companies need to be competitive, economies need to be competitive to create the wealth which underpins your social support, the way government drives the dreams or helps meet the dreams of society. It's really important to have competitiveness at the centre of your thinking. The fourth point. Well, what does Brazil have going for it in terms of competitiveness? Actually, quite a lot, a great deal, looking from outside. You have, and it was mentioned this morning, vast resources. You have huge amounts of water, huge amounts of land, great mineral resources, the wonderful rainforests, a great climate. This is a country which we in Britain might call a lucky country. The Australians call themselves the lucky country. I think Brazil could too. You have all these things. But it's not only that. You have a country which is not like some in the world, where people in Britain look at them and say, no, I wouldn't actually invest in there. I wouldn't get involved in there because I don't think this country is going anywhere. People do think here in Britain, people do think outside Brazil, that Brazil has a great opportunity to realise its potential in the future. It's a vibrant country. It's a country which has a strong democratic culture. You can talk freely, you can write freely, you can meet freely. People work hard in Brazil. It's not the idea that some people in Britain have of a Latin culture. It's another question whether Brazil is even a Latin country, but I'll leave that to the professors. But you are hard-working people and a very inventive people. There's a lot going for Brazil in terms of its workforce. Attitudes are changing. Most of you are young people. You are the sort of people I saw on the streets of Brazil in June 2013, when I was still ambassador, in 65 cities around the country in the 21st of June 2013. I remember it well because it's my birthday. And these people wanted better health, better education. There are a lot of other issues. But you are so important in this, so important for the future of Brazil, that Brazil will have a different future than the past. And then there are some other things I could mention. I mean, because of the economic and political crisis, your exchange rate has fallen enormously. When I left Brazil, I got less, it was less than 3 reais to the pound. Well, it's a little bit more now, as you all know, and this actually helps if you're trying to trade and also to bring in investment. You also still have, for that reason, large foreign direct investment in your country. People from outside are investing in your country. I spoke to a lot of hedge funds towards the end of last year, here in London, where most of them are, in Mayfair, actually, not in the city, and they all invested towards the end of last year in Brazil because they believe it has a strong future. So you have a lot of things going for you. So, point 5, what are the issues? What are the problems? Well, the obvious one right now, in terms of a country's competitiveness, is confidence. People are unsure about what's going to happen. People are not sure whether now is the time in a business to invest, to expand, or to contract, or what to do. And confidence is so important in society and for business. People don't know what's going to happen politically. We still have the impeachment process over us, and what happens after that. Very importantly, in my view, what happens in the next presidential election? Are there going to be new people around, or is there a risk of the same old people being there? Is corruption going to continue to be under pressure, or is it going to return? People don't know. These are obvious things. You all know these. But I'll mention some things which are particularly clear in business and actually are not to do with the present crisis in particular. One thing I noticed as ambassador was the tendency towards protectionism in the Brazilian economy. And this increased during my time, during the last stages of the Lula government, particularly during Dilma's government. And you can always make a case for protecting your own industries. I'll give you an example. The car industry in Brazil is hugely important and very big, and the biggest industrial employer. So a very important industry. During my time as ambassador, it was the car companies, all foreign companies I might add, Ford, Volkswagen, who pressed the Brazilian government to make it harder and harder for imports of cars to come in. What has been the impact of this? In my view, it's been a lack of innovation. You have a lot of cars built in Brazil, but I'm afraid they tend not to be as good as the cars by the same company produced in other countries. And this is because of a lack of competition with the better models, even within one company around the world. So to think more openly in Brazil, to think less protectively, is important. And Brazil has so many strengths, you do not need this kind of protectionism, which puts off foreigners from trading and investing to some extent, and certainly harms the Brazilian consumer. You don't get the Volkswagens you ought to get. You ought to be getting the sort of ones that are produced in Europe rather than the ones that are always produced in Brazil. But I only give that as an example. And of course, there are all sorts of other reforms, which I know have been mentioned already, that are important. The obvious things of having government spending in control, trying to make the pension system affordable in the long term. It's obviously not right now. The tax system, which, as you know, is a huge problem for businesses. I know British businesses, when they came to Brazil, were always horrified by the fact that there was a different system in each state. I'll tell you a story about this. Just after I arrived in Brazil, I went to see Diageo. Diageo are a company which sell Johnny Walker, sell wine. They own Ipioca, for example. They are a very big company in Brazil. And I met their people, very much people of your age, very vibrant young people with big ideas about how to improve the project, how to market it. They then opened a door and said, and these are the people, I looked into an aircraft hangar, these are the people who deal with tax and regulation. Hundreds of them. Now, of course, there has to be tax and regulation, particularly when you're dealing with alcohol. But it was quite clear that this is out of control. Now, I once took David Cameron to see President Dilma in 2012, and David Cameron mentioned that some British companies were concerned about too much bureaucracy, too much tax in Brazil, and she said, it's all the fault of the Portuguese. They taught us to stamp things all the time. Now, I think a lot of Brazilians know this, but now perhaps is the time to do something about it? Just a thought. Anyhow, I could talk about a lot of things of this kind, but to get on to my sixth point, there will be ups and downs in the next few months and years, and it won't be easy, obviously. This is not a great situation. People have been losing their jobs. A lot of people are sliding back into poverty. One statistic I've been really sad about is, while I was in Brazil, the number of people employed as maids declined enormously. Well, some of the women who used to be maids, then found other jobs, are now becoming maids again, and often not, as they should be, under the protection of the new law, which should make sure they have the minimum wage. There'll be a lot of ups and downs. Unfortunately, Brazil did not fix the roof when the sun was shining. You have to fix the roof when it's raining, but you can do it, because, as has been said many times, Brazil is the land of tomorrow, and I believe that tomorrow will come. Seventh point is, it won't be perfect, and you always have to have that in mind. Business can play a big role in this, and I'm sure it will. But it is important to do as much as possible together with business to look at these issues, the big issues that surround competitiveness and the smaller issues, to make sure that you are in as good shape as possible for the future. I'll just finish with one other thing. I said 7, but this is kind of 8. But it goes back to what I said at the beginning about outsiders talking about Brazil. A couple of months ago, I gave a lecture near here to the Royal College of Defence Studies. This is a British institution which invites people from the military and from academia from all over the world, and they have a course each year and they talk about the issues of the world. And I spoke about Brazil, and afterwards I had 5 or 6 people came up to me from various parts of the world, other middle-income countries, from Asia, from Africa, also from others from Latin America. They all said to me, you know, we also have these issues in our country, these issues of corruption. And if Brazil finds a way of dealing with them, that we will need to learn. So remember, people are watching how this is dealt with in Brazil. It will be very, very important for your society and for your economy in the future. And I wish you well. Thank you.